And that's what you should be taking away from it, not the undue pressure of why can't I hit these numbers that that person hit? Well, that person's not you. And there's a lot of things you probably do better than that person, but this is the one thing that they have really committed most of their time and energy to.
You're listening to the Ethos Athletes podcast, where we believe that your health is the number one resource you need to accomplish your dreams. My name is Dr. Matthew Hernandez, and I'm a physician dedicated to helping my patients maintain their active lifestyle and continue doing what they love. I'm sitting down with other experts so that we can provide our listeners with the knowledge they need to improve their health and live their best life. Hey everyone, this is Dr. Matthew Hernandez, and you're listening to the Ethos Athletes podcast, where we are continuing our lifting series. And this is the final episode of our lifting series with August Schmidt, who is the owner of East Valley CrossFit Iron Athlete Clinic and also the president of the Arizona Weightlifting Federation. So August, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Dr. Matt. Good to be with you again.
In our last episode, we discussed training for strength and the considerations that you need to do or you need to take when you're training for strength in particular. Over the last few episodes, we've gone over how to train for different aspects, which included endurance, hypertrophy, strength, and power. And August has also gone over some of the basics of training and the things that we need to be aware of when we're training to prevent injury and make sure that we're actually getting the results that we're looking for. Now, that being said, what we wanted to discuss on this podcast was really looking at how do you align what your goals are when you're training to and how you're training to why you're training. So August is going to break down why people train for us and talk about how to really align that to how they go about doing it. Let's get into the show. And why don't you start off, August, with a few reasons of why this is important, making sure that obviously we're aligning why we're doing stuff with how we do it, and why that's important for multiple different aspects for an individual.
I believe that taking an inventory of why you're training and then trying to align why you're training with how you're training can benefit almost all of us, because you'll get more satisfaction from what you're doing. You'll be able to make better choices as to what you do. Mm-hmm. And it'll be much more enjoyable in general if you're being realistic about how you're training and you're aligning that with what you're trying to accomplish.
And that makes sense. I would imagine, a lot of individuals will go out and, especially like we would look at like New Year's resolutions and stuff, people will go out and say, okay, I need to start working out. I need to start, getting healthy, whatever it is. And they may, think that for a short period of time, it may not be a long-term thing, but I think really understanding what it is that you're wanting to get out of training is going to be important, like you said.
Sure. I mean, if you're looking at it as this is a lifestyle or a long-term thing that I'm committed to that's part of my life, it can change the way that you approach it. Mm-hmm. That was a good example of people like New Year's resolutions that they want to change something. A lot of times people will come in and feel like they need to be a Rocky montage with their training right off the bat. Well, that's not going to be very effective, and it's not going to be very safe for you. Your body's not prepared for that. So it's important to moderate what you're doing when you're first starting, because if you're going from zero, or basically a detrained state, to doing anything, you're going to get an adaptation and you're going to get fitter. So you don't have to do that much. You don't need to go in and smash yourself and not be able to walk and all the things that people do when they start and go too aggressively. So even if you just start easy, number one, it's going to be an appropriate stimulus for your body. And number two, you're not going to dread going to the gym, because if you go in there and smash yourself and it doesn't really feel that good and you don't necessarily enjoy it that much, but you think that's what you're supposed to be doing, you're probably not going to be real motivated to go back and do it again. So start at something that's not terribly uncomfortable. Get moving so you're starting from zero and building up progressively.
That's a great starting point. I get patients every now and then who are, they're either all in or all out, right? And so then they go all in, like you said, like that, Rocky montage, basically. Mm-hmm. And they get beat up because they're not used to it. And they may like it for a bit, but eventually it gets to the point where they're like, F this, I'm done feeling this way. And they just completely fall off the bandwagon at that point.
You usually see that where they're very enthusiastic about it when you're starting it, and it's fun and exciting and you feel like you're accomplishing stuff. And maybe that lasts for a few months or 6 months or whatever period of time it lasts for, but it's probably not sustainable long-term for most people. Mm-hmm. So it's finding what's appropriate and what is the most effective way of training for whatever it is you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I really like how you said it, which I think a lot of our listeners will resonate with, is just looking at it as a lifestyle. Like this is, it's part of your routine. Yeah, you have your goals, which we're going to discuss in a second of what the reasons that you're doing it, but it's just your everyday thing. You just go in, get your job done, and go from there.
Well, I mean, for most people to have physical and mental well-being, you need to move. You need to exercise in some format. Everybody's got a predisposition towards different types of activity for exercise. Nothing wrong with that. You just got to find one that you enjoy and that gives you the benefits you're looking for, and then make it so that it's just part of your lifestyle, because really the benefit of it is doing it for a prolonged period of time.
Yeah. In your experience, when you're looking at reasons that people train and they work with you, different things like that, what are some of the reasons that you're noticing or that people are telling you that why they're wanting to train?
Well, obviously, there's a very broad spectrum of people that are training. There's people that are coming from never having exercised and being totally detrained, and then realizing they need to for their health, for their longevity. Maybe it'll make them happier, all the way to elite athletes who've been training at that level for years. So you're going to have a lot of different people coming in, and you've got to address why is it that you're training? What are you trying to accomplish? What do you enjoy? And then align their training with that. So to break it down, I've kind of put together 4 different reasons that people train. Number 1 would be people that are training for their health, their wellness, the long-term benefits of it, improved quality of life, and hopefully improved longevity. Those are people that are training basically because they know they should. And as long as they find something that they enjoy and it's not excessive, or if it's not too minimal, then they'll probably get about the benefit they're looking for out of it.
Yeah.
You have people training for the second reason would probably be aesthetics, the way they look. They want to look good, want to have a certain look when they're at the beach or when they go out or whatever it is. And that's a perfectly legitimate reason to train too. And you just need to align the way that you're training and eating to meet that goal. Another reason would be for emotional or psychological purposes. Some people use training to make themselves feel better. It gives them that endorphin or dopamine dump when they train hard. That's where you get into people that may be considered exercise addicts, where they're addicted to it. You'll see sometimes people that have been addicts to drugs or something like that replace that with training.
Okay.
In a modality or methodology of training like CrossFit, you see quite a few people that get addicted to basically the feeling after the workout, because you feel so good when you have that big endorphin dump and the dopamine and all the chemical reactions that are going on as a response to the stimulus.
Yeah.
4th one would be for performance. And that's going to be your competitive athletes. You can even count in there hobbyist athletes, but they're training for a specific goal to be able to perform a specific task to a certain level. So those are kind of the 4 that I've broken down. I think most people have a blend of those 4.
Yeah.
It's rarely just purely one or the other.
For sure.
So yeah, you have several of those going on at once. So you may be training for performance for your sport, but you also kind of like the way it makes you look. That's the aesthetic part of it. You feel good after you train, and there's probably some health benefit to it. Now, when you get to the extremes of training for elite performance, it's pretty controversial if there is a health benefit or even a negative health impact.
For sure.
If you get up to 350 pounds to be a strongman competitor or a power lifter, there's going to be negative health consequences to being that heavy. If you push your body extremely long, like an Ironman athlete, there could be other negative effects of that on your adrenals, all different areas that can be affected by it. So the extremes of athletic performance aren't usually going to be motivated necessarily by health outcomes, but along that spectrum, you can get health benefits from just playing a sport or competing in something.
I would imagine that everyone's obviously going to have a multiple. I mean, like if we look at like me personally, like the first 3 resonate with me. I wouldn't say like I'm a super competitive athlete by any means, but the first 3, I mean, the longevity of life, making sure I look good and feel good, those are all important to me. When you're looking at, I would imagine there's a difference between how you approach someone who is in the 4th category of performance versus the other 3. And is there a difference between how you approach someone who's just looking at longevity versus aesthetics versus mental, emotional?
Yeah, that's where you see a lot of the internal conflict that people deal with. Is they may be training for health purposes or for recreational purposes, but they'll get obsessive with, I can't miss this workout,
Right.
or they'll miss other life events that they should be at so they can train, or they'll put undue pressure on themselves for performance when they're not really living the lifestyle of someone that could have those expectations. So it's just that internal conflict that people have with when they have misaligned with why they're training and how they're training.
Yeah.
So for most people, it shouldn't be a big deal if you miss a training session, or, if you don't eat perfect for a day, or, those kind of things. It should fit your life, and you should be able to move along with no distress from it if you break from your protocol for a short period of time.
Right.
So that's where you see a lot of times athletes that are competing recreationally, and they're looking at elite athletes who are competing as for a living or as a career, or as that's their primary purpose.
Yeah.
And then the recreational athlete may be frustrated because they're not hitting those same kind of goals or same kind of numbers, or because, that's usually how they're measuring it, is the performance or maybe appearance.
Yeah.
So the recreational athlete has to keep in mind that they're doing it for recreation. They're doing it to make their life better. They're doing it to enjoy it, and putting undue stress on themselves because they're not measuring up to an elite athlete is inappropriate, and it's not going to lead to better outcomes for them.
Right.
Whereas if they were an elite athlete, there's a lot of things that they have to sacrifice to make their number one priority being their training and their performance in their sport. They have to eat in a relatively strict way. They have to make sure they're getting enough sleep. They have to sacrifice time with friends, family, work. So there's sacrifices there socially. There's all sorts of demands on an elite athlete like that, and they make that their highest priority, and they don't deviate from that. And that is one of the factors in how they get the elite performance. Whereas if you're doing it recreationally, it shouldn't disrupt your life to that level. And because you're doing it recreationally, you need to not hold yourself to the same expectation of someone who is doing it at an elite level or with that complete commitment to it.
Is someone who is training recreationally and not getting the result of a performance athlete, because obviously they're not training at that level, is that the most common issue that you see with some people, or are there other patterns that you see that are more common?
It depends on the environment that you're training in.
Yeah.
Training in a gym with competitive CrossFitters and competitive weightlifters, you'll see that quite a bit.
Yeah.
Because there's people that weren't elite athletes or even athletes, and maybe sometimes before they started because they were interested in it and they enjoyed doing it. And then they see what on social media and everything else, what elite athletes are performing at and what they're posting and all that. And then they stop enjoying it because they're not performing at that level.
Yeah.
Well, that's just a misalignment of why you're doing it and what your expectations are. I mean, there's a lot of variables to go into someone performing at that elite level. Probably number one is genetics.
Right.
They were born with a predisposition to be good at that thing.
Right.
And then it's the time commitment they've made to it, the lifestyle changes they've made or sacrifices they've made to perform that way. So there's just a lot of different things that go into it. And it helps if you can really keep yourself aware of why you're doing it and what your level of commitment to the performance is. Yeah. So if you're just doing it recreationally, you shouldn't get that upset if you miss a workout or if you don't hit, a number that you wanted to hit. You're doing it just to make your life better. And if it's causing you distress like that, it's not really making your life better.
Right.
So it's really putting the appropriate level of emphasis on the performance, because you can do a sport recreationally and not necessarily have to emphasize the outcomes nearly as much as an athlete who's competing for the purpose of hitting specific outcomes. Yeah. And if you do it recreationally, you get the social benefit of training and competing with other athletes. You get the benefit of exercise. You get the benefit of pushing yourself. You get psychological benefits, all the things that are good from it. Mm-hmm. And that's what you should be taking away from it, not the undue pressure of why can't I hit these numbers that person hit? Right. Well, that person's not you. Right. And there's a lot of things you probably do better than that person, but this is the one thing that they have really committed most of their time and energy to, and they had a predisposition towards it, and they're in the right environment, and they're getting the results that an elite athlete has to get.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I mean, at the end of the day, I think just like with anything or with so many things in life, a lot of it has to do with understanding and managing expectations and being able to communicate that. As a coach, where you've coached a lot of elite athletes, you've worked with a lot of individuals, and not only elite, but I mean you've worked with the gamut of what we just talked about. When you're seeing an athlete or someone struggle in their training with really aligning those two things of how they're training and the mindset that or what they're trying to accomplish, how do you as a coach approach that, and like what are some things that you like, how do you go about helping them kind of realize like, okay, you either need to change your training or need to change what your goal is going to be, right? Like one of those has to change.
Having this conversation with them.
Yeah.
Let's identify why you're doing this. Why are you competing as a weightlifter? Why are you training as a weightlifter?
Yeah.
And then once we identify why they're doing it, it's recreational. Then we have to say, okay, well then you don't need to hold yourself to these standards of an elite athlete. You need to make it so that it makes your life better and you enjoy it, and that you're, getting some level of performance, but it doesn't have to be, nothing is dependent upon it.
Right.
So it's athletes looking at elite athletes and either trying to replicate their training, which most people shouldn't do.
Right.
Because those elite athletes, number one, are born with a predisposition to that. Number two, they got years of training under their belt to build up a tolerance to that type of training, and they're living a lifestyle that makes it so they can train that way.
Yeah.
A lot of times when you saw people getting into sport, CrossFit or sports like that, maybe even bodybuilding or something else, they want to start copying the training protocols of elite or pro athletes right off the bat.
Right.
Well, you're totally unprepared for that.
Yeah, it takes a while to get to that point.
Yeah, and you probably didn't win the genetic lottery.
Right.
Like, you could take most other people and put them on the training protocol of Matt Fraser or Rich Froning, and they're still not going to be Matt Fraser or Rich Froning.
Right.
Those guys are who they are. They were born with a predisposition towards it, and then they committed their lives to it and have developed to where they're at.
Yeah.
You can't just walk in with no background in it and say, okay, I want to be that, and start training that way immediately.
Yeah.
You have to start in at an appropriate level of training or appropriate intensity, appropriate volume, give your body time to adapt, and then kind of see how you're naturally progressing. People that are born with a predisposition to it, you're probably going to be able to identify relatively quickly once they start training. They're going to usually learn movements very quickly. They're going to have a pretty good tolerance to recover to the training load.
Yeah.
They'll recover pretty well. It kind of comes naturally to them is almost how it looks. So you can usually identify that fairly quickly. I mean, there's always exceptions, but yeah, I mean, if you weren't like an elite athlete in anything else before, and then you pick up a new sport and say, I want to be an elite athlete, that's kind of being unrealistic about the process and about the factors that go into determining who is elite.
Right. Yeah, that makes complete sense.
So it's just having that conversation with people and explaining, like, okay, that's nice that you're excited about this and you want to be good at it, but we got to go through the process. You got to pay your dues. You got to do all the background work before you have any chance of training at the elite level.
Yeah.
And you get to train at the elite level if you did all the background work and you have the right genetics and you maintain the proper lifestyle. So it's just getting people to understand how much goes into training at that level.
I think some people have an idea of the amount that takes, and there's some people who are just completely oblivious to it, or just have no idea of, for a lot of these athletes, I mean, this is their full-time job. They go, I mean, this is what they focus on, 8, 9 hours a day, stuff like that. And it's,
yeah. And people will see that. And the primary thing they're focused on is if I just get that training program and do that training program, I'll be like that athlete.
Right.
That's not really how it typically works.
Right.
And that's not how they started training when they were coming from a state of being detrained or when they were not at all adapted to that sport.
Right.
So you're kind of jumping in the middle of it, looking at them when they're kind of at the zenith of their abilities and saying, I'm going to train just like that because I want to perform like that. Well, you don't see the 10 years leading up to that they did building up to it, or whatever other sport they did that prepared them for this.
Right.
Most of the top level CrossFit athletes, not all of them, but most of them, were pretty competitive at another sport prior to doing this. So they had been training their entire life, and that really prepped them to roll into another type of high level training.
Yeah, that makes complete sense.
So it's just getting people to try and understand that, and it's really going to be for your own your own benefit, because you're going to enjoy what you're doing. It's going to be manageable and sustainable, and it's not going to injure you.
Yeah.
Whereas if I started trying to do what Matt Fraser does every day right now, I'd probably be hurt within a few days or a week.
Right.
It just doesn't make sense to come into it that way.
That makes sense. There's a huge or pretty good distinction between someone training for performance versus the other three categories you mentioned. Are there any kind of special considerations that you have to take with any of those categories, like individuals who are just training for health or improved longevity versus psychological versus aesthetics?
Sure. Yeah, there's a ton of variables that go into that as well. If you're training for health, I mean, you need to make sure that what you're doing is effective for that, and that you also enjoy it and will do it long term.
Yeah.
So there should probably be some kind of load-bearing activity where you're building strength, increasing bone density, connective tissue, all the things that you get from load-bearing activity. And there probably needs to be some degree of cardiovascular exercise in there too.
Yeah.
However you mix that in, whether you mix your strength and your cardiovascular work together, or if you separate them, you can get most of the health benefits either way with that.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be at a super high level of intensity very often. You just need to be active and moving, and then once in a while push it harder, but continuously work on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. When you look at other categories of people training for aesthetics, I mean, that's pretty well out there what you need to do for that, depending on what degree you want to take it to. And a huge part of that's going to be your nutrition, and then any type of supplementation you're doing.
Right.
For psychological reasons, I think most athletes have some degree of a psychological reason why they do it.
Absolutely.
Whether it's for their self-esteem or for their enjoyment or for the chemical reaction they get from doing it. Sometimes you will see people that get overly driven to it because that's what makes them feel good, and so they just keep doing more and more of it and act like an addict. And that can be very destructive. It can be something like an eating disorder or something, where they're damaging their body because they're obsessively training.
Right.
So you have to kind of watch for that, and that's going to be probably one of the tougher situations to intervene in, because they're going to have pretty strong beliefs about what they're doing and why they're doing it.
Right.
So they're pretty attached to it.
Yeah.
So that can be tougher, and that's probably more in the range of something that a therapist or psychologist would probably need to meet with them to kind of figure out what's going on and why they're doing what they're doing. So those are the different categories and kind of the reason behind it. And again, all of us probably have some of those present in in why we're doing whatever we do training wise. But you just have to identify it, align it with what you're trying to accomplish, and enjoy it. So that you keep doing it.
I like the kind of the step process that you gave earlier of like, okay, start off easy, make sure you're not dreading going to the gym because you're hurting, and slowly build up from there. And I mean, it all has a compound effect, right? Just over time, you'll start to develop more tolerance, all that stuff. Yeah.
I'd much rather have someone underwork when they first come in than overwork.
Yeah.
Because underwork, you can come back tomorrow and we can do some more.
Right.
If we overwork and we, break you.
Yeah.
We can't unbreak you.
Right.
And that completely defeated the purpose of what we're doing, which is trying to get you active and engaging in fitness.
Right.
Now, most of the time you recover from that, but it's a setback, it's discouraging, it decreases the likelihood that you'll adhere to a training program.
Right. Yeah. Have a habit, build the lifestyle for it.
So I think you're much better off underdoing it than overdoing it.
I agree with that.
Because you can always come back the next day if you underworked.
Yeah. Going back to kind of the reasons that, people train, you mentioned when we're looking at health and improved longevity being one of the reasons. So for those of you who haven't listened to previous episodes of our podcast, a while back we had Janet McConnell, who's another trainer up here in North Scottsdale. We kind of discussed the benefits of weight training. And again, this is our lifting series, so you can tell that I kind of have a bias towards weight training as a whole. And when we're looking at the aging process and everything, there's a lot of studies and proof that have come out with regards to strength training and how it prevents what's called sarcopenia, which as we age, we start to lose muscle mass. that decrease in muscle mass slows down our metabolism, screws up with our hormones, can have us cause more joint pain, all these different things. And so if we can continue to train throughout this entire, as much as possible, do weight train, do load bearing exercise, like as you mentioned, that allows us to improve our muscle mass, which prevents all these other things down the road from occurring with harming our health. Again, that's why I'm such a proponent for strength training, and I want to be able to bring in individuals like yourself, August, who can kind of educate us more each time on this thing, or on strength training as a whole. And I mean, yeah, and then just going back to what we said, like going and starting easy. I mean, I know there's definitely been times when I've gone on my own to go and train, and I look up whatever program I look up online, and then I go and kill myself in the gym. It feels great in that moment, and then like I'm hurting for like 2 weeks afterwards. I'm like, oh well, yeah, I can't even go back to the gym because I'm dying right now. So
you'd have been much better off with a smaller dose, less intensity, less volume, and come back the next day.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's a big mistake that you see very frequently.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've made it myself. I've done it twice. I was stupid enough to do it a second time, and then at that point, it's like, all right, I can't do this. Otherwise, I know I fall out of it, right? And it's just okay. I won't. It'll take me a bit to get back to it again. And so, don't if you're trying to pick up training or working on increasing your load, don't do what I did and try and take on a bunch, because then you're just gonna harm yourself down the road.
And I think when you're working with a coach or a trainer,
yes,
that should be something that you take into consideration. Anybody can push you to the point where you puke and say, oh, look how hard I worked you, that was so good, but that may be good, like rewarding or whatever in that moment, but it's not necessarily long-term in your best interest, and it's probably not going to make it so you're likely to come back the next day or come back next year, or keep coming back over years. So you want to find someone who is conscientious about not overdoing the work that they're putting you through, especially early on. Yeah. Because, it may make them feel cool that they made you puke or that, you're super sore or something like that, but that's not really the mark of a good trainer or coach.
Yeah, I agree with that. Hiring a coach myself, I mean, that's one of the best decisions that I've done for myself, because it's not only one, again, part of the reason why I wanted to chat with you in particular is I had no clue how to program for different goals, stuff like that. And now I have a little bit better idea of that. I still don't want to program because there's people that are way better at it than me, and such as yourself, which is why I'd rather just have a coach walk me through that. But at the end of the day, it's also, they can program for me, they can make sure I'm not being overworked, and at the same time have the accountability to keep me on it and continue showing up. Because I know, I mean, even 4 years ago, I bought a membership to the gym that's literally walking distance across the street from where I live, and I never went. And it wasn't until I, hired a coach that got me to go more frequently, and that's how I built the habit. Yeah,
because most people, that's not what you spend your day thinking about or studying or dwelling on. Is you're probably thinking about whatever your profession is, your family, your finances, all the other things that you're thinking about. It's probably not that high of a priority in your thoughts throughout the day.
Exactly.
And you probably haven't taken the time to acquire the experience to really be able to effectively program or train yourself. And I mean, it's similar to, if you have a medical issue, you go to a medical professional. You have a legal issue, you go to an attorney. You need accounting help, you go to an accountant.
Yeah.
So it's just finding one that's right for you, that's a fit, and that's professional with their approach to it.
Honestly, that's been one of the best things for me, because I mean, what made me go and hire a coach after the fact was I knew what my goals were, and my goals were, I wanted to, just for my overall health. I mean, I'm a doctor, right? I have to go and live what I preach, right? So I want to be able to do that. And then I like the feeling of it. I mean, and I like the aesthetics of being able to look good. I want to be able to look fit as well for my patients and everything, and be a model of that. What I found was the excuse I kept using in my head, or the excuse I kept giving myself before I hired a coach, was I could go to the gym, but I don't know what to do. And nor do I want to try and figure out what is a good workout? How do I know I'm getting, I could go and look up a few workouts, but how do I know it's a well-rounded thing? If I'm going, 3-4 days a week, whatever it is, how do I know it's actually well-rounded? I have no clue. right? And I specialize in sports medicine, but at the end of the day, I didn't learn to program in medical school. So
yeah, it's a very different thing.
It's a different thing. But yeah, and when I realized and came to terms with, okay, this is the excuse I was using, then let me go and just hire someone that takes that excuse away, because then I don't have to ever think about it. I just show up and I'm, listen to what I'm told.
Most people probably need that and benefit from that. Is having, so that they don't have to spend their whole day thinking about how they're going to train that afternoon, or, learning enough to be able to program for themselves. You're probably better off making it so that that's just compartmentalized. That person is there when you're supposed to go train. They're going to take care of it, make sure that you're doing appropriate things, and that you're working towards the goals that you have or the outcomes that you're looking to get.
Yeah.
So, it kind of compartmentalizes things, or takes that off of your plate, which we all do every day in a lot of different areas, whether you're ordering your food out, or you didn't go get that food and prepare it and all that, you just order it, or any other area where you hire someone who's a specialist in that field.
Absolutely. Yeah, so that's been one of the best things I've been able to do for my health, in addition to all the nutrition changes that I've made with it. And I've been happy since then. And then going back to you as a coach, being able to have that conversation, like you said, of what this podcast has been about, of really understanding what their goals are, how do you program for that, how do you help them hit that, and then how do you listen to and communicate your expectations and their expectations, and really round that out to give everyone a good program to work with.
Sure.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add on to this particular episode, or any other final tips that you have for the listeners of this lifting series that we've had?
My final thoughts on it are basically find something that you enjoy, a style of training that you enjoy that makes your life better, and dig into that. And then if you're ready for a change, then transition to something different. But find something that keeps you engaged in fitness or in training, so that you get the benefits of it, and so that you have a better quality of life. And again, it's about longevity and doing it indefinitely, which is going to largely depend on probably having more enjoyment than you have unenjoyment from doing that activity.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. I love it. If you'd like to learn more about August, I know we've talked about some other ways that you can get in touch with him, but if you'd like to learn more about August and some of the stuff that he does, again, you can visit his website of the Iron Athlete Clinics. In our show description, we have the link there. And that contains a bunch of blog articles, a bunch of resources that August has created to help individuals with training. You can contact him on that as well, I believe, if you're interested in coaching with him and everything. Yeah, any other way people can contact you?
We also have the East Valley Strength website, which is for the gym. Those would be the two main ones, ironathleteclinics.com and eastvalleystrength.com.
Awesome. Perfect. August, thank you so much for joining us on this lifting series and educating our listeners on everything that when it comes to training, how to do it properly, and how to align everything with how you go about doing it.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, Dr. Matt. It's been a great opportunity to talk with you.
Awesome. I'm sure we'll have August on in the future. Everyone, again, thank you for listening, and we look forward to catching you on the next episode.
Wanting to look youthful and age gracefully? Our team at Ethos Aesthetic Medicine love working with individuals who want natural-looking results with minimal downtime. Our Ethos Glow approach is designed to help you show up as your absolute best self by giving you brighter, more even, and youthful-looking skin. Ask our team how you can get more information on our Ethos Glow approach to achieve natural-looking results that make you shine.